There's a chapter that was never published, a section of The Prince that Machiavelli wrote in the dead of night, by candlelight, in his exile outside Florence. A chapter so dangerous, so psychologically devastating, so brutally effective that even he knew it could never see the light of day. Not because it was immoral, not because it was evil, but because it worked too well. And if everyone knew these tactics, society itself would collapse. History tells us that Machiavelli wrote The Prince as a guide for rulers, a manual on how to gain and maintain power in a world where morality is a luxury and survival is the only law. But what history doesn't tell you is that there was more. Pages that were removed, sections that were burned, knowledge that was deemed too dangerous for public consumption. Because while The Prince taught you how to rule, the forbidden chapter taught you how to become untouchable, how to control not just kingdoms, but minds, how to make people destroy themselves while thinking they're winning. For centuries, scholars have debated whether this chapter actually existed. Some say it's a myth, a legend, created by those who wanted to make Machiavelli seem more dangerous than he was. But others, those who study the gaps in his manuscripts, those who analyze the sudden shifts in his writing, those who understand the political climate of Renaissance Italy, they know that something was removed, something was hidden, something was too powerful to share. Today, you're going to learn what was in that forbidden chapter, not word for word, because those exact pages are lost to history, but the principles, the tactics, the psychological weapons that were too dark for the prince, they've survived, passed down through secret societies, whispered in the halls of power, used by those who understand that true control doesn't come from force, but from making people believe they're free while you hold every string. This is the knowledge that was burned for a reason, and once you understand it, you'll never see the world the same way again. The prince teaches you to be feared or loved, but the forbidden chapter teaches you something far more powerful. Make them think they chose you. Make them believe that every decision they make is their own, while you've carefully constructed every option they're choosing from. This is the ultimate form of control, because it's invisible. They don't resist. They don't rebel. They don't even know they're being controlled. Machiavelli understood something that most people never grasp. Human beings will fight against obvious control, but they'll embrace hidden control. Tell someone what to do, and they'll resist. Give them two choices that both benefit you, and they'll feel empowered while you get exactly what you want. This is the illusion of choice, and it's the foundation of invisible power. Think about how this works in practice. A ruler doesn't force his people to support a war. He creates a situation where they demand the war themselves. He manufactures a threat, real or perceived. He controls the information they receive. He frames the narrative so that war seems like the only logical choice, and when the people march to battle, they think they're fighting for their freedom, their safety, their values. They don't realize they're fighting for his agenda. In personal relationships, this principle is even more devastating. You don't tell someone what to do. You create an environment where they naturally do what you want. You don't demand loyalty. You make disloyalty seem like a bad idea. You don't force someone to stay. You make leaving feel like their loss, not yours. You become the prize they're afraid to lose, not the person begging them to stay. The forbidden chapter explains this through what Machiavelli called the architecture of decision. Every choice a person makes happens within a structure. That structure includes the information they have, the options they see, the consequences they fear, and the rewards they desire. Control the structure, and you control the choice. But do it invisibly, and they'll never know they were controlled at all. This is why the chapter was burned. Because if everyone understood this principle, if everyone knew how to construct choice architecture, society would become a hall of mirrors where nobody could trust their own decisions. Every interaction would become a psychological chess match. Every relationship would be a power game. The social fabric would tear apart because trust would become impossible. But for those who understand it, for those who use it ethically and strategically, it's the most powerful tool in human psychology. You don't fight for power. You don't demand respect. You don't force compliance. You simply create an environment where people naturally give you what you want while believing it was their idea all along. The prince teaches you to eliminate your enemies, but the forbidden chapter teaches you something far more elegant. Elevate your enemies until they destroy themselves. Give them exactly what they think they want, and watch as it becomes their prison. This is the art of destruction through success, and it's one of the darkest tactics Machiavelli ever conceived. Here's how it works. When you have an enemy, someone who threatens your position, someone who wants what you have, your instinct is to fight them, to expose them, to bring them down. But that makes you look threatened. It makes you look weak. It creates sympathy for them and suspicion of you. You become become the villain in their story, and they become the underdog everyone roots for. But what if you did the opposite? What if you publicly supported them? What if you helped them get promoted, get recognition, get exactly what they've been chasing? What if you elevated them to a position where their flaws would be exposed, where their incompetence would be obvious, where their true nature would reveal itself without you saying a single word? This is destruction through elevation. You give them enough rope to hang themselves. You put them in a spotlight so bright that every flaw becomes visible. You place them in a position where the pressure is so intense that they crack, and when they fail, when they collapse under the weight of their own ambition, you're not the one who destroyed them. They destroyed themselves. You were just the generous person who gave them an opportunity. Machiavelli saw this tactic used in the courts of Renaissance Italy. A rival would be given a prestigious position, a difficult territory to govern, an impossible task to complete, and when they failed, as they inevitably would, their reputation was destroyed. But the person who elevated them, they looked magnanimous. They looked like they believed in giving people chances. They looked innocent, while their enemy's career burned to the ground. In modern contexts, this principle is everywhere. The coworker who's always undermining you, recommend them for a project that's doomed to fail. The friend who's always competing with you, encourage them to pursue the thing they're not actually good at. The romantic rival, step aside and let them have what they think they want, knowing that the relationship will expose their flaws in ways you never could. This tactic was deemed too dangerous because it weaponizes generosity. It turns kindness into a knife. It makes people paranoid about accepting help because they can't tell if it's genuine or strategic. If everyone used this tactic, nobody could trust success. Every promotion would feel like a trap. Every opportunity would seem like a setup. Society would become paralyzed by suspicion. But used carefully, used rarely, used only against those who truly deserve it, this principle is devastatingly effective. You don't fight your enemies. You don't expose them. You don't attack them. You simply give them exactly what they want and watch as it destroys them from the inside out. The prince teaches you that it's better to be feared than loved. But the forbidden chapter reveals something more complex. The most loyal followers are those who have betrayed you once and been forgiven. This is the loyalty paradox, and it's one of the most counterintuitive principles in all of Machiavelli's work. Here's the psychology. Someone who has always been loyal has never been tested. You don't know if their loyalty is genuine or if it's just that they've never had a reason to betray you. But someone who has betrayed you, who has been caught, who has faced consequences, and who has been given a second chance, that person's loyalty is different. It's conscious, it's chosen, it's reinforced by guilt, by gratitude, by the knowledge that they owe you their position. Machiavelli observed this in political alliances. The most reliable allies weren't the ones who had always supported you. They were the ones who had once opposed you, been defeated, and then been brought into your fold. They knew what it was like to be your enemy. They knew the consequences of betrayal, and they knew that their current position depended entirely on your mercy. This creates a psychological bond that pure loyalty never can. The person who has betrayed you and been forgiven carries a debt. They know you could destroy them at any moment by revealing their past betrayal. They know their reputation depends on your silence. They know their future depends on your continued favor. This makes them more loyal than someone who has never had anything to lose. But here's where it gets dark. The forbidden chapter suggests that sometimes you should create the betrayal. You should set up a situation where someone close to you appears to betray you, even if they didn't intend to. You catch them in a compromising position. You make them think they've been disloyal, and then you forgive them. Now they owe you. Now they're bound to you not just by loyalty, but by guilt and gratitude. This tactic was burned because it's pure manipulation. It's creating a false crime and then offering false mercy to create real control. If this became common knowledge, if everyone knew that forgiveness could be a control tactic, genuine reconciliation would become impossible. Every act of mercy would be suspected as manipulation. Every second chance would feel like a trap. But the principle reveals something true about human psychology. We're more loyal to people who have power over us and choose not to use it than we are to people who simply never had that power. We're more grateful for mercy than we are for kindness. We value what we almost lost more than what we always had. In relationships, this manifests in toxic patterns. The partner who almost leaves but stays. The friend who almost betrays you but doesn't. The employee who almost gets fired but is given another chance. These people often become more devoted than those who never wavered. Not because it's healthy, but because the near loss created a psychological bond that stability never could. The prince teaches you to maintain order, but the forbidden chapter teaches you to create strategic chaos, to destabilize situations just enough that people turn to you for stability, to be both the arsonist and the firefighter, to create the problem and provide the solution. This is controlled chaos, and it's the darkest principle in the forbidden chapter. Here's how it works. People don't value stability until they experience instability. They don't appreciate order until they've lived through chaos. They don't seek strong leadership until they feel vulnerable and afraid. So if you want to be seen as essential, if you want to be the person everyone depends on, you don't just provide stability. You first create the conditions that make stability necessary. Machiavelli saw this in how rulers consolidated power. They would allow or even encourage small conflicts, minor crises, manageable threats. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to keep people anxious, enough to make them feel unsafe, enough to make them crave a strong hand to restore order. And then the ruler would step in, resolve the crisis, and be hailed as a savior. The people never realized that the crisis was manufactured specifically to create that dependence. In modern contexts, this principle is everywhere, and it's terrifying once you see it. The manager who creates unnecessary urgency so they can be the hero who solves it. The partner who creates emotional instability so you depend on them for emotional stability. The friend who stirs up drama in the group so they can be the mediator who brings everyone back together. They're creating the problem and the solution, and you're thanking them for both. This tactic works because of a psychological phenomenon called trauma bonding. When someone causes you pain and then relieves that pain, your brain creates a stronger attachment to them than if they had simply never caused pain at all. The relief feels like rescue. The absence of pain feels like love. You become dependent on them not despite the chaos they create, but because of it. The forbidden chapter was burned partly because of this principle. Because if everyone knew that chaos could be weaponized, that crises could be manufactured, that instability could be strategic, society would collapse into paranoia. Every problem would be suspected as manipulation. Every crisis would seem like a setup. Trust in institutions, in leaders, in each other would evaporate. But the principle reveals a dark truth about power. The person who controls the problem controls the solution. The person who can create chaos can also create order, and people will always choose order over freedom when they're scared enough. In your own life, you see this in relationships where you feel like you can't leave because they're the only one who understands you. But did you ever ask why you need so much understanding? Often it's because they created the confusion in the first place. You see it in jobs where you feel indispensable because you're always putting out fires. But did you ever ask who's starting those fires? The ethical use of this principle is to recognize when it's being used against you, to see when someone is creating problems so they can solve them, to understand when chaos is strategic rather than accidental, and to remove yourself from situations where your dependence is being manufactured. The prince teaches you to preserve yourself, but the forbidden chapter teaches you when to sacrifice yourself strategically, to lose a battle to win a war, to appear defeated when you're actually positioning, to let them think they've won while you're setting up the real victory. This is the sacrifice play, and it's the most advanced tactic in the forbidden chapter. Here's the concept. Sometimes the most powerful move is to lose, to let your enemy think they've beaten you, to retreat, to surrender, to appear broken. Because when they think you're defeated, they stop watching you. They stop defending against you. They celebrate their victory and let their guard down. And that's when you strike. Machiavelli saw this in military strategy. A general would retreat from a battle, appearing to flee in defeat. The enemy would pursue, confident in their victory, spreading their forces thin. And then the defeated army would turn and attack, catching the enemy overextended and unprepared. The initial loss was strategic. The retreat was positioning. The defeat was theater. In psychological warfare, this principle is even more powerful. You let someone think they've won an argument. You let them believe they've exposed you. You let them feel superior. And while they're basking in their victory, you're observing their tactics, learning their weaknesses, preparing your real move. You've traded a small loss for valuable intelligence and strategic positioning. This tactic appears in relationships constantly. The partner who gives in to end an argument, but is actually just avoiding a fight they're not ready for. The employee who accepts criticism publicly, but is documenting everything for a future lawsuit. The friend who lets you think you've won the social competition while they're building alliances you don't see. The forbidden chapter was burned partly because this principle makes every defeat suspect. If losing can be strategic, how do you know when you've actually won? If retreat can be positioning, how do you know when you've actually defeated someone? illusion. It creates a paranoia where victory feels hollow because you can never be sure it's real. But the principle teaches something valuable. Don't confuse battles with wars. Don't confuse appearances with reality. Don't confuse short-term losses with long-term positioning. Sometimes the smartest move is to let them think they've won while you're playing a completely different game. In your own life, this means knowing when to argue and when to appear to concede, knowing when to fight for your position and when to let them think they've changed your mind, knowing when to defend yourself and when to let them believe their attack landed. Because sometimes the person who appears to lose is actually the person who's controlling the entire game. Now you understand the 5 forbidden principles: the illusion of choice, destruction through elevation, the loyalty paradox, controlled chaos, the sacrifice play. These aren't just tactics. They're psychological weapons that, if widely known and widely used, would destroy the foundation of human society. Trust. Imagine a world where everyone knew these principles, where every choice felt like manipulation, where every opportunity felt like a trap, where every act of forgiveness felt like a control tactic, where every crisis felt manufactured, where every defeat felt strategic. You couldn't trust anyone. You couldn't accept help. You couldn't believe in reconciliation. You couldn't feel safe in victory. Society would become a paranoid nightmare where every interaction was a psychological battle. That's why the chapter was burned. Not because the tactics don't work, but because they work too well. Machiavelli understood that some knowledge is too dangerous for mass consumption, that some weapons are too powerful to be widely distributed, that some truths would destroy more than they would enlighten. But here's the paradox. These tactics are already being used by politicians, by corporations, by manipulators, by narcissists, by anyone who's figured out these principles on their own. The forbidden chapter wasn't burned to prevent these tactics from existing. It was burned to prevent everyone from knowing about them, to keep the knowledge in the hands of the few while the many remain ignorant. So what do you do with this knowledge? You have 3 choices. First, you can use these tactics yourself. You can become the manipulator, the controller, the hidden hand that shapes outcomes while appearing innocent. But know that this path leads to isolation, because once you see people as pieces to be moved, you can never have genuine connection again. Second, you can use this knowledge defensively. You can recognize when these tactics are being used against you. You can spot the illusion of choice. You can see destruction through elevation. You can recognize manufactured loyalty. You can identify controlled chaos. You can detect the sacrifice play. This is the ethical use of forbidden knowledge, protection, not exploitation. Third, you can reject this knowledge entirely. You can choose to live in a world where you take people at face value, where you trust intentions, where you believe in genuine kindness. This is the most peaceful path, but also the most vulnerable, because whether you acknowledge these tactics or not, they're being used around you every day. Machiavelli never claimed to be a moral teacher. He claimed to be a realist. He looked at how power actually works, not how we wish it worked. He studied what actually succeeds, not what should succeed, and what he found was uncomfortable, dark, and undeniably true. The forbidden chapter represents the ultimate Machiavellian dilemma. Is it better to be powerful or to be at peace? Is it better to understand these dark tactics and live in a world of strategic thinking, or to remain ignorant and live in a world of trust? Is it better to be the player or the piece? Most people never have to make this choice consciously because they never learn these principles. They live their entire lives being moved by forces they don't understand, controlled by tactics they can't see, manipulated by people who learned these lessons through experience or instinct. They're the pieces on the board, and they never even know there's a game being played. But you now know. You've seen behind the curtain. You understand the forbidden principles, and that knowledge changes you. You can't unsee it. You can't unknow it. You can't go back to naive trust. The question is, what will you do with it? If you choose power, use it wisely. Use it rarely. Use it only when necessary, because the more you use these tactics, the more isolated you become. The more you manipulate, the less you can trust. The more you control, the less you can connect. Power and genuine relationship are inversely correlated. The more of one you have, the less of the other you can maintain. If you choose peace, choose it consciously. Know that you're making yourself vulnerable. Know that others will use these tactics against you, but also know that there's a different kind of strength in vulnerability, a different kind of power in trust, a different kind of victory in genuine connection. Not everyone needs to be Machiavelli. The world needs people who choose peace, even when they understand war. This chapter was burned for a reason, but you needed to read it, not to become a manipulator, but to stop being manipulated, not to control others, but to control your own life. not to play games, but to recognize when games are being played on you. The forbidden knowledge isn't forbidden because it's false. It's forbidden because it's true, and truth, especially dark truth, is dangerous. It changes how you see the world. It changes how you see people. It changes how you see yourself. But ignorance isn't protection. Naivety isn't innocence. Not knowing these tactics doesn't mean they're not being used against you. It just means you're defenseless against them. And that's why this knowledge, as dark as it is, as uncomfortable as it is, as dangerous as it is, needed to be shared. Machiavelli wrote The Prince to teach rulers how to maintain power. But he wrote the forbidden chapter to teach something deeper, that power itself is a game with rules that most people never learn. And in that game, the person who doesn't know the rules isn't playing fair. They're just losing without knowing why. Now you know the rules. Now you see the game. Now you understand why certain people always seem to win, why certain tactics always seem to work, why certain patterns keep repeating. It's not luck. It's not charisma. It's not even intelligence. It's knowledge. Knowledge of principles that were deemed too dangerous to share. If this knowledge disturbs you, good. It should. If it makes you question your relationships, your choices, your trust in others, that's the point. Because comfortable lies are more dangerous than uncomfortable truths. And the most uncomfortable truth of all is this: the world is not as innocent as you were taught to believe. If you're ready to see the world as it actually is, if you're ready to stop being a piece and start being a player, if you're ready to understand the game that's been playing around you your entire life, comment below. I see the game, not as a declaration of manipulation, but as an acknowledgement that you're no longer blind. Like this video, if you understand why this chapter was burned. Subscribe if you want to learn more forbidden knowledge, more dark psychology, more Machiavellian principles that the powerful don't want you to know. Because this isn't about becoming evil. This is about stopping evil from being used against you. The chapter was burned for a reason, but the knowledge survived, and now it's yours. Use it wisely, use it carefully, use it to protect yourself and those you love. Because in a world where these tactics are being used, ignorance isn't bliss, it's vulnerability. Welcome to the forbidden knowledge. Welcome to the game. Welcome to the truth that was too dangerous to print.